Síneann teorainn na hÉireann 500 kilometr ó Lá Carlin in Oirthir na Tíre, go tí Lá Fiáil san Níor Thuaisceart. Rud cásta is se teorainn na hÉireann, líne dó agaiche a gearann sé fríd bháilte, sráidbháilte, títhe agus pobl fiomháin. Ar thaobh amháin tá poblaigh na hÉireann, Thuaisceart na hÉireann an tíomh agus is fíor a rá go bhfuil teorainn na hÉireann an líne is mó conspáid agus is mó caint san Eorp le blianta baga anuas. Iarhhairt díreach na Críochdheighilt se an teorainn, cinniú ag leacu a ndiaidh an siar a rint ina gá lea. Croitheadh Thuaisceart Éireann na mína Baltaine ndiaidh Bhí nálaigh na bliana sin síneadh an comhaontú Angla Éireannach ag bronú neamhspleáis ar na chondaithe uile. Rud suntasach is stair na hÉireann a bheith bhonú na teorainn. Níor thaillí daoine ag an am go mbeadh an lína fós ar an léirscail 100 bliain ina dhiaidh. Go deimhin níor thaillí siad an teannagar a bheadh ag an lína chéarna ar stair an Oileáin. Agus fiú anois le Breatimeacht.
It will kill the Union.
Éilmh na halban maidir le neamhspleáis, an plé ratha faoi phrótacal Thuaisceart Éireann, agus buirthaí an phobal Aontachtach tá Críochdheighilt fós có sciilteach is a bhí a riú. Is cum a Céad a bhí ar insin ag an tús. Am fearfa anois de Aontachtach le Gaeilge golar thoras timpeall na teorainn agus níos fuide a gceann. Má tá an líne a scarann an Thuaisceart ón deisceart dó agaiche anois, cé có bhainteach agus atá sí aniu de aonlaachtaí na ndaoine a bhar an taobh lé. Ach tá bun cheist an go fáil, 100 bliain tar éis Críochdheighilt. An fíor a rá go bhfuil Críochdheighilt ar an bhealach is éifeachtaí le déaláil agus le cosintí dheanú ar gá aonlacht ar aon Oileáin amháin, nó an fíor a rá go raibh tap inón de chonceap na Críochdheighilte díreach ag an tús. Agus mé ag smaoineamh ar Críochdheighilt, tugann an spáis sin ina dtagann poblaigh na hÉireann agus Thuaisceart Éireann le chéile chun cibhne leithreach. Nuair a bhí mé am fáisí caiithmaidir le head a sira go minic chun dé hir canal nas cibhneam nuair a bhí muid ag pilliú ar an Thuaisceart go rómaid ag teacht fríd na seach faointí agus bhríne níor wathí mé go raibh sé fíor aisteach agus dóigh go raibh mé cleachtaí le gconaí as a bheith am a cónaí a Thuaisceart Éireann. Níor leormuid faoi hir dheifriúil a bheith an go bhunasa gur de cúilre Aontachtach sinne just páirt den tíal a bheith an, bhí mé cleachtaí leis is dóigh. Ní raibh mór an cáil agam gulthar an teorainn ó leitheanta sin má áige, go tí gur thosaí mé ag fólam na Gaeilge a lár na nóideí. Bhín am seo bhí an teorainn agus sochaí Thuaisceart Éireann achraithe ar fad. Ba iriseoir mé le linn cantaí faoi comhaontú ine an cheasta, agus ag an am waithí mé go raibh muid a gáil th tarseach éigean. Waithí mé gur thug comhaontú ine cheasta deis nua dúin le lig, agus beidir go raibh níos mó spáis an don aonlaach sogamsa, Breatimeacht me se gandáid ag an ar chéarna, bhí an Gaeilge thar a bheith táhachtach mar fart den aonlaach sogamsa, agus síle mar bhealach gur tugadh aicheantas duna gréthaí éagsile nó duna sranganí éagsile atá mar fart den cineal có aonlacht atá agam, agus is mai an rud gnearna sé sin. Níos mó na na háthraithe ó thaobh na bhéinealachtaíte a chrothaí comhaontú ine an cheasta, seasan cionn físiúil amach, cursaí taisteal, baithre nua, mótar bhealaí nua, Inniu is dilly an líne a Gaeilge, teorainn hóstach idir gá limisteir, gan bóhain custom, gan fáigne bhíleata, agus gan pólaní. Nuair a thosaí me sé ag siomainn seo dheas, bhí a sogam leicreach go raibh mé ar an taobh eile den teorainn mar gheall ar caighdean na mhaithre. Bhí siad a bháid níos measa ó dheas an táim sin. Ach níl sé sin fear anois, agus tá mé ag brath ar an chorrach ón gcúthainn fócas sogam sa le corraniúil go bhfuil sé an amdú stocail suas ar crispy agus ar haaclaid. Tá neart achraithe tácaí ar an teorainn, agus í a gul in Éireann don fáilte ratha. Inniu, téann na mílte thart orthaí gach lá, gan bach nó stró. Ach níos mó na daoine ar bí eile, maithíonn an pobal a bhharann faoin scá seonagar na teorainn. Tá dhearcin trá ag tús na teorainn, agus ag tús ma thurais farsant a héan, agus is an áit í seo atá seonagar nó lorg na Criochdheighilte fós le bra go láidir. The fáil amach go dé mar atá an síal achraithe thart faoin teorainn, tá mé ag bualadh le Alice a híthrí Céad bliain le deireannas, an é siarna le Criochdheighilt héan. You are 100-year-old and you've seen a lot of changes over the years, Alice. What would you think are the most important changes that you've seen?
Well, everything was gradually changing, and it was changing at such a rate that you don't feel it. You don't know what's happening.
You told me about the days whenever you used to go down and do a wee bit of smuggling. Would you have been down very often, or was this just once or twice a year?
Oh God, would have went down about once a month. And that was my job, because I knew all the places to go.
Ah.
Nobody wanted to come because they hated the job of going round. I says, I don't care, I'll do it, because somebody has to do it. We have to live, and we can't get the stuff here. We'll get whatever we want down there. We crossed over at the middle of the night, way down into the dead of the country, and bought all we wanted and carted it all home.
Tell me this now, Alice, did you ever get caught coming back?
No.
Never? You never got caught?
No, but one day this man, he was out on the railway stand where we come off the train, and he was out, and he spied me, and he come over to talk to me, and he says, "You have a great arm on you." I had the heifer stuff.
Did you?
And I says, "It's only natural." And he said, "Very good, that's all right, go on ahead and enjoy it."
Curran Kivney Alice we smuggled lima and spot solace or hyun than a hachriche is mo, case charan, Mara Akame, and Tientas Orpok, August and Mardagu Éireann.
You have this growing rapprochement between Westminster and Dáil Éireann in terms of their joint European membership from 1973 on. I mean, they signed together, they joined together, they had common interests within Europe, they often supported each other, they shared interests.
69% yes, no, 31%. We might just.
Mar gheall ar Waragu Coitianta, mar gheall ar Aontas Eorpach, ní raibh aon gá le teorainn ar chúisir bí seachas ar chúsaí slendala. Nuair a curú jeú leis an gá slendala, ní raibh chúisir bí go mó teorainn an. Agus bhuailí sé sin go leor den na fhaibantaí a bhain leis an Criochdheighilt de gachtainna ach den aisinithe ach go hairithe.
Agus iad birch mar bháil den Aontas Orpach, bhí an dá rialtas ag bualadh chéile go réalta ar ábhar comanta. Caidreamh nua a bhí an, agus an táim seo bhí sé bunaiche ar ceisteannaí a bhain le comhibriú, seachas coliniú.
I remember bringing Americans to Dublin a few years ago, and they couldn't believe this. You know, they'd read so much about the violence on the border, and they're just sailing in a coach through the Gap of the North from Uri to Dublin. Or they go on a train, and there's no border at all, you know. I mean, where's the border in Ireland?
There was a sense of opening up in many border communities that I know of once that became possible. So it's had a beneficial impact on communities.
Rin an Taontas Orpach agus an Margu Éireann Jiffer mór in Aitiga mar seo. Bhálach rinneú a bhunú do hart an teorainn agus an Criochdheighilt. Bhí rudaí níos fosa go physical agus go politiúil. Tá an tá hainú physical seo le bra go láidir in Thuaisceart ardmhaithe. Seo spás a bhí múlaithe tra ag bunáid na feicalacha de céid orm na Breataine lámh amháin. Agus imní faoi ionsaithe strateisica de chuid an IRA an lámh eile. Creide nó ná creid, bhíú bunáid míleata de céid orm na Breataine an slíomh seo tíomh hirdíal. Imiche anis bagnach fad. Ach trád éon tíal bhí an cheantar seo plúdaithe le bunáidena dá leithéid. Agus rudaí ag achrú, het se lán rudaí in áit ceart ag an am ceart. Caithi an Taontas Orpach, cuaintú ine an cheasta. Caithi an cuaintú sin prósis na síochána. Agus thugann síocháin deistúin tuiscint a bheith agén aonlacht rinse. Ach seans go bhfuil an méid sin faoi bhagirteanais ceall Breatimeachta.
We can now say the decision taken in 1975 by this country to join the common market has been reversed by this referendum to leave the EU.
Nobody saw it coming. It reminds me of the old phrase, you know, that the British historians often said that every time the British addressed the Irish question, historically, the Irish changed the question. But in the last 10 years, it seemed that Ireland and Britain had resolved the question in the medium term. And suddenly the British changed the question by introducing Brexit.
But I'd rather in chin a go hacks na heron no done kieru le kiga bliain. Ní rú boniach bhaile lí agus boniach London ag léún lechana chéarna. Agus anis tá lás an stáisiú Yas ag teach salach go puinte lás an stáit London.
The Irish problem was an afterthought in the Brexit debates. You can see that. I mean, conveniently overlooking the fact that 55% of people here had voted against Brexit.
2006 to 2016, we had 10 years of probably the best border we ever had. I can't think of a better border than the one that existed then because it really was irrelevant. Now we're hardening up again. We're noticing differences. And it's not comfortable.
Agus in teorainn le brach éis, caithí gróna agus tóilteoirí gola daithí cursaí. Could you mar a raithí seo a bhaim cursaí trádaile an mháte ó thuí den lína, áhhail dúir can trá? Éadain, bhí neart tranglamán le linn cantin na Breatimeachta cén tionachar atá ige cursaí trádaile in dúir can trá agus áitiní mar seo.
Well, there are Harlan just brought fi Breatimeacht fi an annual growing taxilliar fi shaw ni romagic geri choran sanaraga no choran an talu ma arkan tu an choran and shaw an talu chen ni smo na 3 vile jeg de lari haran choran chanahan lashin ni smo is a hen o dover go kale ahan la fosta ma arkan tu an mage grona ata heart an choran a usagen an choran chanahan la ta ni smo na acht míle grona a gceist. So tá sé inta tógadh go bhfuil an teorainn sin oscailte.
Agus mar sin is féidir le dúir can trá a bheith ag arc ó Yas agus ó thuí ag an éar chéarna.
Má arcan tú an seansatá a gannne tá rud a gannne seo sa Thuaisceart go speisialta thar an teorainn nach bhfuil aitir eile an dóin. Tá má jabal a bheith trádáil leis an Taontas Orpach an Margu Éireann sin, comáil le Margu Éireann an réocht aontaithe. Now, céilann sé sin go bhfuil Virginia ábalta trádáil gan stras, gan stró, gan friction le níos mó na 600 milliún duine agus tá sin ina seans inta mór de grónan seo.
Mar a Éireann, tá teorainn talamh oscailte leis an orb lán de potential do Chríochdheighilt i Thuaisceart Éireann. Rud eile ar fad áfach is se teorainn talamh réalaithe.
Táthar I céint go minic na leitheanta seo ar aiscur na teorainn. A cé có indianta agus atá sé ar mhóthar gríoch mar sin. An méú seachfaointíon, cén cuma a bhéú orthu. Agus go deimhin cén tionagar a bhéú acu ar cursaí trádaile. Agus na Jonamas Jarmad na bhfuil géistin seo a cion a bhhain as ga héadas a hácht bóthar tras teorainn.
Agus muide chur na geisteannaí seo faoi hothaí na teorainn, bú orgar an am atá thart. Go dé a bhí an ribhe lena sinna dhéanú ba chórdú pilú ar leitheanta má aige, agus na bóthain costam atá fós ar mhóthar na gimhnaí stogamsa go pársanta. Nuair a tháinig Criochdheighilt ar réams na ndiaidh fichidí, bhí teorainn wag a gceist, lína in bhanach ag scarú na Breatimeacht ó hiarnas dá chuid. Ach Jerry an caidre vidir an dá hir níos casta, mar gheallar sin Jerry an teorainn hían níos casta.
Nuair a bhím ag smaoinniú ar an teorainn seo an sort rud atá ar in sin agam, seán teach custom. Thosaí rialtas bhaile a clia a dóigh bliain tar éis bhonú an tír stáit. Bhí siad ag éirí an neamhspleáthas airgeadais a chur inniu, agus Jerry leo ag ag an uair chéarna rinn siad daingna ar na Criochdheighilt sían.
Bhí na seachfaointe seoán le monitorach de dhéanú ar Gluaiseacht airí. Seo iad na bunchéimena i tró thorann idirnáisiúnta go thomlann, a tharla nuair a dag éire an cólachas an 1928. Ír ifiga custom is seo taig ó mhuileáin le taithí tro bliain. Tá mé ag bualadh leis san áit ina méad sé ag obair.
Seo an príomhbóthar idir bailíocht lí agus béal ferriste. Ladan slí ó gúndalgan go dtí ócinn trád ag an teorainn an seo carricarnan. Seo an esportáil a bhí ar siúl, airí ag dul go dtí an Thuaisceart. Bhí muidne ag obair in san uirgan seo agus bhí an cartlós seo, bhí sé lán de lorries agus gachrod, agus bhí mar angnóach ar fad airí ag dul ó thuaidh ag an am sin. Agus trasna an bóthar, so gná bhí uniforms áirinne, agus bhí áirinne dul I lár an bóthar an sin, agus scrúdú a dhéanamh ar airí a bhí ag top ón Thuaisceart. Síos, bhí gná le daoine dul suas, bhí a lán rudaí a bhhad níos saoire in san Thuaisceart.
They closed the roads down to what were, for years and years, identified as approved crossings. There were 17 right along the border.
Bheith feibantíon, bheith scúiníon, bheith siad a déanú chorrach ar de char agus mar sin de, chuir daoine suas leis ach cinnte gur chuir sé mhuill ar chórsaí, fiú ar na cúil báithre, bhí sé deachar go leorgáil trasna an teorainn go cinnte. Ach rinn daoine é, bhí go héirí de clufií pelle agus gáil go baile clia agus mar sin de.
Taig, bhain na títhe custom le gearú cain, cén sort airí a bhí a gceist?
When the stuff of Gachroad, the stuff of bhí si gnách le daoine dul go dtí úrcinn trá agus sé telefís agus airí electricais a fháil. Sin de gná daoine ach lorries mar a déartha is troscán agus just gach airí ar down fiorring súl géir a chamad orthu mar bhí siad ag éirí airí a thógann isteach gan an cáin sin a íoc.
Bhailú, cain, umpertala, ceadúnis ibre, Leichracht, Vílata, Wuan, Corti a ligiad de Horan Idirnáisianta. Gáeilge, Anion, Nananion, Gahir, ag stanú ar a chéile ar bhóthar tuaithe idir Dúrcan Trá agus dún dalgan. An é seo a ró údar na Criochdheighilte ag súil leis?
It's fair to say that in 1910, if you'd asked Irishmen in Belfast, Dublin, or on the border at Derry Lynn in County Fermanagh, and you'd said to them in 10 years' time, this island will be divided amidst considerable bloodshed, they would have been amazed. It begins to creep in by insidious small degrees, really from 1913 onwards, when the Home Rule debate is in full flight.
Nuair a hiig Aontachtúirí ag tús an chéad seo caite nach mbeadh siad abalta féin rial de éireann na stapú. Thachraigh siad gealú siar, titim siar, cúlú siar heag cúgáilú ait a ró go leorlóir Aontachtúirí an agus thachraigh siad gan a bheith ina Aontachtithe éireann is mó ach an bheith ina Aontachtithe alú agus breisiúr hiúil.
A rud a dhí Lloyd George leis na náisní heidir sé go méú Criochdheighilt sé chundaí an seo an céadúr ar leach siad riomh le sé chundaí ach go méid sé sealadach. An déal a dhíl sé leis na Aontaachtaí ná go méid sé chundaí an ach go méid sé buan. Now, caiidú chuilinn le gibh na solar thosaí na chainteanna seo bhí an Criochdheighilt a bhaim anna hin. Criochdheighilt agus ach dom rialú na hÉireann agus oscailt na Parliamente mil fáiste. Bhí fi sin mar buntlocht na chainteanna mar bhí siad an anarán sin archta seo socraíthe ní higlann é a throchrú ná rud seo a breisiú as the céile.
You know, even the most trenchant unionists thought, you know, kind of we'll get away with exclusion for a while, but it's lasted 100 years.
Cibé cosparí a bhí ar insin ag bun údar na Criochdheighilte, bíad sí buan nó sealadach, rinneú an bhápáil ar thíorrach eile ar fad, go politiúil agus go tíreolaíoch.
Tá an infrastructure a bhain leis an teorainn beagnach imithe ar fad, agus tá baithre nua ar an leir scoil go mhaith. So fágann sé sin feib all-war. Ma bhíonn daoine ag éirí teorainn nua crua chur an áit. Caithit go ddíireach ar aghaid an líne.
Ina lán casan a rihan an lína seo ddíireach trí phobal, bháilte agus títhe fiú amháin atá scapaithe thart ar an teorainn. Tá sí cóceatach an ámanna ná go méadh agat go raibh an lína compa ag daoine a bhí ina gcónaí a bhád uíche.
This is border country, the dividing line between the British province of Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. The border meanders for nearly 300 miles.
I'm standing on the border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. There are no signs to show it, no barriers and no customs posts.
That is the actual border. Now, you might get one or two people say, you're in the south. Yeah. But in fact, that was the line there. Yeah.
Tá mbeidh tionmainn strídeach atá beagán í aisteach seo Collins nó Dromulí Salíonn píosa de chundaí Mhaoinecáin atá timpeallaithe beagnach ar fad ag chundaí Fermanagh. 7 kiloméadar faoi 3 kiloméadar atá ann agus é gearrtha amach ón cuid eile den phoblacht. Go deimhin, ma bhíonn tú ag éirí tionmaint ó bhaile farhan an seo an Dromulí go bhaile farhan eile a chundaí Mhaoinecáin, caiithid tú gáil trasna na teorainn faoi go. Scéalaíonn simúil atá ann ach léiríonn sé na deacreachtaí a croitheadh an teorainn don phobal. Léiríonn sé fosta gur lag an tuiscint a bhí ag commission na teorainn ar réachtanis an phobal. Seamus, I'm fascinated by the concept of Dromulí and this area. Can you show me on the map where this mysterious line actually runs?
Well, this is it here, going from this narrow neck here all the way around here, sticking up, protruding up into Northern Ireland. The British Army named it the Dromulí Salient. The Irish Army called it Coleman's Island. because the only way they could come into the area was by helicopter. The Boundary Commission in 1924 and 1925 referred to it as the Penny Enclave.
If a person was travelling from one part of Monaghan via Drummully, how complex was that in terms of customs and posts and things like that?
It was very complex and created a lot of inconvenience to the people. Going from Cavan to Clonus, you cross the border 4 times. First place here, Leggy Kelly, there at Clonoonie, then at Clonagore, and then at the aqueduct just before you come into Clonus. The Garda could not come in here, nor the RUC. I'd say along the border here where we were, we used the border to our advantage because it became famous for smuggling. Everything was smuggled. From hairnets, safety pins, onions, cattle, pig, pork, whiskey, gin, even coffins were smuggled.
Mr. McCrae, a shopkeeper, undertaker and a Protestant, buries the British. When a Catholic dies, he drives Pettigot's one and only hearse to the border, where John Britton, who's Irish in spite of his name, collects the hearse and goes off to bury his fellow Catholics.
Where are you for today? Ballysham. Ballysham? Yeah. Good. Safe journey.
And I remember incidents from early childhood, like my uncle's farm, which was just outside Clonus in County Monaghan, but being separated by the spikes because you had to go through County Fermanagh as one of those anomalies you get all around the border. And he had to build a wee back road that allowed him to get into the town because he was barricaded on both sides. So we built that through a corner of one of his fields and called it the Khyber Pass. Another grandmother, she moved up to the area in her later years, and she lived in a wee house where when she walked from her living room into the kitchen or from her bedroom into the bathroom, she'd cross the border. So she spent her day sort of going to and fro.
Stand by, blow now. Here we go.
The temporary blockage was put in some long time ago, long before my time, and it was cut away.
It was cut away by some of the local people who wanted to reopen the road.
To get their cattle over and go to the market and come to church and all those good things, eh?
Agus in teorainn na géirí buan, ag scorí daoine a ró lán a gitse acu don ciide smó, damsí na pobl faoin na scá bailí le gol in Éireann. Ach níos mó na líne bí léirscáil, ba an mion jailteach tríd an cuaige a bheith mar chrílar an ábhar. I dúisgad an tá daoine an a orcan an teorainn mar thorann idirnáisiúnta. Croitheadh sí feibanna ach tá siad sásta agus atá na sé condaithe fós mar fáirt den rialt aontaithe. Ach tá daoine an lámheile ag orc an teorainn mar mhac orbit na tíre bhain ile ileáin. Dar leo churann sí isteach an caidreamh ságasan le clán, le cairde, le cultar agus le haireach béidir. Cinneal bunker féinneachta atá, cid de na daoine sásta bheith an agus cid eile I géirí eilú as is dóigh. Tar éis bhunú an dad líonses na níide ag fichidí, thosaí an scilt idir féinneachtaí agus ide ólaíochtaí beagnach leithrach. Bhí a lán éagraíochtaí I lár géarchéama. Bhris cid mhaith acu ina gá leah, cion ó thuaí agus cion ó dheas.
A clí rins éagraíochtaí le struachtar ile ileáin. Cumann luchlas géal an cion is mó clú béidir. Agus os rud é go ró man náisiúnach ag an CLG, bhí sé sin ina cidú mór le náisiúnaithe an Thuaisceart tar éis Criochdheighilt. Ach ní ró sé first a gcónaí. Éigean, cén sort feidhmní leithil a croitheadh an teorainn don Common Luachlas Gael?
Nuair a cruú an teorainn bhunn ag tús ag I fiche dó agus an sin I fiche trí. D'arraigh an saoil I ná ire ag dó lán clubanna sa Thuaisceart, insne sé chundé. Mar hampla, ní ró cead acu úsáide a bhaint as na páircin na páid blí. Bhí mise I mo bháil de chorla olú ar fá blianta fada. Chuig mé ar chorla olú mar ionadaí ón cáháin. I 1988 agus fiú ag an am sin, is mai is cyfan lam, rinne muid tuairiscí 1989 agus I 1989 fós I chahar bhfuil firsta. Ins na páircin na páid blí a bhí ag an bardas ag an cóirleán sin I mbeil firsta. Céad 8 is a cehar dífa. Is do soccer a bhí an, agus bhí ceithre páircinna aganne I Common Luachlas Gael. Agus sin I 1989 is an óca. So, an levéil sin rinneú a lán damiste de ás agus de orbert Common Luachlas Gael. Taobhiste de na sé chundé. Thosaigh sin nuair a curú an teorainn ar
An ró contar John riú go mé scilt thuí háas margheall ar cursaí a bheith teitmeach ar an talú.
Níor hála sé, agus an fáin ar hála sé ná. I náíre cóirle olú bhí siad anna háhachtach an scéal, agus ní raithann siad an teorainn. Fiúháin ins na mion tuairiscí, má éircann tú ar na minutes na mion tuairiscí de cóirle olú le linn na ficheadaí, ní luann siad an teorainn. Níor luigh siad in éon mion tuairis go bháin go raibh teorainn an. So I náíre siad a rinneú Common Luachlas Gael agus go háirithe cóirle olú ná, just lean siad a réig leis an saoling an is agus ní raibh an teorainn an ná bach leis an teorainn.
Tá daoine le cúlú a Protestúnach agus Aontachtach a chur spéis a cursaí Common Luachlas Gael inis. Cé go táhachtach agus atá an ábhar seo a Éigean?
Dúirt mé sé inar a bhí muid sin caint faoin teorainn gur aithrig an saoil nuair a curú teorainn ar an Uilleáin seo agus creidim sin. Ach aithriú an saoil a rís le linn an conara ine an chéasta. Agus le linn má chréibh se mar uachtarán a chorla olú, thug muid curú de Peter Robinson, bhí éisin mar príomh ara I stormant ag an am. Agus cánig sé ag chun an cluiche ceannis in ardmhaithe, an cluiche ceannis chuirdan an dochtúir bhí ceanna. An chéadúir ó curú an teorainn is ar an siar seo gur hála sin. Bhí sé fíor háhachtach.
Agus mé I hí an seo a bart pella a clúanós a condé uinecáin, rihan swainú lomsa. Cé có táhachtach agus atá rudaí mar sport agus muid ag éirí ar bhéinealacht nó ar bhéinealach rinse fiú a chur inniuil.
Achanna ar an teorainn bím ar mo warana faoi go dé mar a bhéimis in an ar bhuineamh kitchen a úsáid le teacht le chéile. Hanna bhain a ggóthaigs an sport agus na halaíonna fosta. Ó amgaí chéile agus mé ag táisteal ar an líne, feadh am rud a déta alaíonn teorainn a chur air.
Seo rud a thugtar an border buster air. Le linn na tribloidí win daoine áitiúil a úsáid as a lehéid chun baithre a bhí páilta ag orm na Breataine a dhéanú as Jack. Tá an cion seo curtha in airde mar bheabhracán ar na lehénta sin. Sort alíonn sráide atá an, nó alíonn an phobal mas mailead a chur mar sin.
Tá simbal daoine ar a chun an bóthar a aithceanú le feadh go litreúil sa Tógadh seo. Tá sí an mar glóir láidir in ndiaidh na ndiaidh. Bíonn na halaíonna ionach éifeachtach mar bhealach ina bhfuil pobal na teorainn in an plé a dhéanú ar na téamaí a bhaineann le críoch conspóideach. Alíonn túir a bhreathan lorg a síal ar an ghiommal is seo Anna Savage.
I suppose like everybody, the memories that I have are always, my mummy always shopped in Dundalk because it was cheaper and it would have been punt back then, and My memories were always going through the big border security checkpoint at Clog. And when we would have been going to school, like the soldiers would have always been sort of walking around or hiding or whatever. At that time, they were probably only our age. Like when I was 17, they were probably only 18, but you were never allowed to speak to them or things like that, you know. And I think there's a word called psychogeography, and it basically means within the arts that it's a place that sort of relates to where you grew up or where you are, and it sort of relates to your emotions and how you then react, and obviously to me, how I paint. In 2019, I was accepted for the Drawn from Borders project. It was all about the decade of centenaries and partition and the border. I walked past this structure every single day, which is in Omeath, and it's actually an old climbing frame, but it reminded me of the army watchtower structures that I would have been used to when I was growing up. So what I did was I took loads and loads of photographs, and I used what you would call a Solarize app, and it basically is the most linked or the most liked to the night vision that the army would have used. You can sort of see that the circle is sort of ever prevalent in the work, and that basically is just a reminder of the camera lens, because South Armagh was like, it was always being watched all the time.
The British Army bases are gone, the soldiers have gone, but would you still feel their presence in any sort of way?
Yeah, I would. Like, there's certain areas, and for me personally, I don't think they should be forgotten, and that's why I'm doing these projects, because I want people to know what we lived through. So I do think it needs to be preserved in some kind of way. I wish that we didn't have a border, but that's my own personal opinion. And I just hope that the island as a whole starts working a bit more together, especially within the arts.
While a lán rudí ó hui, ag leis na halíonn a fiú a bheith deilteach.
Is áras teach an díl is me tací ar an bhur. Ringus na cosses.
Tá an ceolaíonn ag táhachtach mar fart do a héalpaí me bháilú óran is brálim a bheith ag éisiú le óran agus tugann sé a lán soltú a bheith ábal de PC a heine a héan siar na céad a bliain agus sin mar fart den startá an. Tá sé táhachtach dar lomsa go tuigeann déanaí go tugann an cheol daoine le chéile. Thir mé Gaeilge ar an sais le taispeint gur féidir elementí cultúrtha a bhascu agus rud nua a croitheadh. Ceapan daoine go bhfuil sé conspóideach mar óran, ná, sin troflis ar fad. Rud aontaigh sinanta táón, má bhíonn tú ag éisiú leis an bhonn lágan. An rud a tharla ná a gaiithú na mbliain tú curú versaí eile leis sin an áit bhfuil an conspóid dar lomsa, ach sin rud a rééis a tharla ar an dáthaobh ó thaobh an cheolta. Is spéis lomsa na féidirthachtaí sa commas cultúrtha seo. I mháilte teorainn tá có ibriú lárnach don mharthanas. Agus féinneachtaí ar léith faoi ansaí, tá cúnamh ar fáil ón phobal níos leachna.
The arson attack on Newton Cunningham Orange Hall last month left many bewildered in this close-knit Donegal community. Catholic neighbours in Newton Cunningham were appalled at the attack, but determined that it won't undermine that sense of community.
The community around here gets on very well. Like, if you need something, ask someone and they'll give it to you, or vice versa. We pull one another out, and there's no bitterness between us.
Tá mé tacaí go hála árasteach a bhí, ceall casú gan cinne, fuacaí ar an taobh contráide den teorainn. The teach slán bhí iriseoir ndiaidh.
Stuart, the original hall on this site was burnt down in 2014. What were the implications of that blaze?
After, I suppose, surviving relatively intact the whole period of the Troubles,
it was a massive shock. You know, that someone would attack a building like this with its identity and feel so strongly that they wanted to burn it down, where people thought that all that had disappeared with the introduction of the Belfast Agreement and subsequent sort of developments which had taken place.
I believe that in the wake of the attack, the local GAA club offered the use of its premises to the lodge while the hall was being rebuilt. How was that received?
The offer was received as a gesture from another community organisation, bearing in mind that whenever the local parish hall had been refurbished here in the town, that the hall had been used here, the Orange Hall had been used by the church, the Roman Catholic parish, for both bingo and bowls. So there always had been reasonably good community relations between both communities in this part of the world. Although it's an Orange Hall, it's used by the wider community. So during the rebuild, we had a way of how we would integrate it into the wider community of the area. And we looked at what activities we would run post-opening. So therefore it has left us basically starting up with running things which are relevant to those people around us.
We're delighted. It's a great, proud day for us, Donegal Orangemen, to be back and are celebrating the 12th in our own native county.
We have to be relevant in this day and age to where we're at so that we can succeed as an organisation.
I'm an Orangeman because it's a cultural expression of what I am and what the people before me have been. You know, I've no strong views on the political scene because you're removed from it in this part of the world anyhow.
I suppose historically, since partition, the Unionist identity has existed within this part of County Donegal that ended up in the Irish Free State. So therefore the identity would be that of being British within the new, or the state of the Irish Republic.
Tar éis Criochdheighilt bhí 8,000 Protestúnach foicí an tíomh contráilte den teorainn, a gcóndaiche hir Conal, Muoinecháin agus Cabhain.
James Leon a river sin, héine a lán acu suas le cúnant olú, ag inis wahi Céad go raibh leatra mór a dhéanú orthu, bhí siad a níl amach.
An lámh ile, Dark náisiúnaithe Thuaisceart Éireann mar hac fuair dá gultar ó tháinig an dástad a réim an Oileán.
Ag an iarraing na seascadí bhí an crú an tarne leis an gluaiseacht am cheart a sibhialta agus imach na áhhail ca híomh áhagaí in nura a nídeag seascaní. Anis bhí gluúin nua do catlachaí a réim, daoine óga a bhain brabús as an act edicus in nídeag daichead a hacht. Béidir bhealach gurbé seo an fíor hús le conceap an comhanis.
Tá mé ag bualadh le garáid ó Hara, Ír, Mhéara, Cahar an Gire. Lóiríonn sé lum faoi ard na ndiaidh ó Chríochdheighilt go dtí na tribloidí in nura.
Well, changing sheer go dtí na fichidí nuair a bhí commission bunny an onkar an teorainn den dástad nua. Bhí sé geistig daoine go mbeidh an óin an áil, go mbeidh sin mar cineál críoch den áit. Ach de Harrah a gur an Memorial Hall chun ceathrú den Ard Áiristeach. Agin na Bálaí agus Ard Uglis níomh colm. Hí ba bhaile ó gura a bheith sa Thuaisceart. Rinú na héindachtarí just leach cearcail a dhéanú hart bhrúach óin an áil agus sin dara an san Thuaisceart. Ach thug sé sin fáib eile dóibh mar bhí tromlach náisiúnaí in nura, 7 fan géad. Agus so bhí orthú na teorainn teohannaíachta ahrú go mbeidh tromlach acu. So I gcathair ó 7 fan géad den náisiúnaí, bhí siad in San Córla bhí 25 mar onadaí acu.
These streets are the remains of a Catholic slum area.
Our guide here was a nationalist local councillor who uses the word discrimination loud and often, and especially down here.
The council has concerned itself merely with housing the Protestant families in this town and has neglected the Catholic families. Catholic families are living in these conditions since the Northern Ireland government was set up 40 years ago.
Ceantas na faiban a bhí an a bhí idir jaú an in Éireann náisiúnaí Jeremy Fóisteachta agus go háirí Jeremy Títheachta. So hosaí an Dairy Housing Action Group agus hosaí siad san a Jano Agoji agus Tamil Innovation Hannig and Civil Rights Association amach agus hosaí siad san ag Agojacht agus stoigar ben Jeru agus an tús a bhí lei sin ar an cúigiad de mí dhearú fór Seasca Hocht ag Duke Street nar a bhunú an mórthúil Carta Savilda amachas na sráidena, but an tam seo rinne was cór na Camry telefise agus phléas gahan rud in é sin.
An éibe bhí an mar seo nó níor áthraí cursaí ó thuaí idir ndiaidh fiosraíonn agus ndiaidh seasca ní, ach dathraíonn dóin agus dathraíonn bhreatain. Agus má churann tú clábín na rudaígan agus tá teannas an bhana chun, ribh bhád tófar an brú go dtí go bléascar an clábí, agus sin go ddéireadh rud a tharla.
The troubles just spiral and spiral. The opportunities to end them are missed.
Feú trothal bliain de gáirtú fola an, cogu cathartha a bhírinne, sular ghlacu le deis gol a tro na siachana.
Hosaí Aontachtach agus náisiúnaithe ag Lords le chéile Hart fa Ampshire Cosantóir Éireann an cheasta. Cén sort cibhní pásanta atá agat ar na leithéanta sin?
Well, bhí sé aisteach, bhí ar an ggóilsús go stormant don Céad uair. Bhí ahan daine tarraingt ar an aim céarna, siahan, a bhaint amach, agus le foirne bhí rudaí más a fíochmhar ag an am, agus bhí sé cineál híle go raibh sé rud bag aisteach go bheith caint fa siahan a lár cogu más a all.
I think the most important thing is just to make sure nothing goes wrong in the last bit of it. Because my worry is with the document as long and complicated as this, that people will come rushing forward at the last minute and try and either add or subtract things.
What we're here today doing is to finally, I hope, reach agreement that will, as I say, settle our quarrel and release all our energies to working together.
Yes, 71.12%.
The Good Friday Agreement sought to shine a light in these dark places and learn by that exclusion. And it tried to include everybody. Paramilitaries on both sides. You know, the assembly was to be very broad-based. So we were on a new sort of level. Irish governments now talked about Northern Ireland. They didn't talk about the North or the lost counties anymore.
I have to pinch myself for the fact that we got a negotiated process, then to be involved in that negotiated process.
Is Kevin Lumsa Garoana has their galore Dini, Heel Shid Garo Keshna Heron, Socrithe, Mas Smilat, Heel Shid Garo Keshna Driblogy, Socrithe, Mas Smilat.
Agus Kirshin Ruddy in a Kiart Beiger Rud Bacora Harley Trobly and Revision, Pes Ursa Jocoladini Ve, Mununagas. Agus Beiger Guru Glan Sheer and Rod Lakeshire Prisoner Mac Agus Stock Martian to be made able to Criochdheighilt an Ur.
I think too many people though saw the Good Friday Agreement as being the end of a process. It was only the beginning, and we probably know that now.
Próiseas siachana agus achhunsráis is seo Cosantóir Éireann an cheasta, a tháinig ar an tíal 23 bliain ó hen. Ag tá machalí na stára le Chríochdheighilt a gcónaí. Tá deich agus imilú fós an, agus go tí go rachar an nglaic leis an tráma gan réiteach seo ben na chorrach linn a gcónaí.
Fegan daoine costalachtaí idir an foréig an na hála ar na maileamh agus an Thuaisceart ins na ndiaidh fiche nó an ndiaidh seascaní. Cibé croitheadh sé go bhfuil na fheibbhnaí agus na cúiseannaí le Criochdheighilt fós an 100 bliain ina dhiaidh. Táispeann sé fosta go gaiithimid a bheith ag plé le sothaí atá sciilte is scartha ar bhealach níos éifeachtaí agus níos apaí.
Tá an gríomhaí tras phobal, Linda Irvine ag éirí a chrochu a dhéanú ar cheist na bhíonnealachtaí generá.
Linda, this is an area where some or perhaps many people might feel disenfranchised. How deep do those feelings go? And do people have genuine reason to feel that way?
I suppose it's an area that suffers from high unemployment and low educational attainment. I think a lot of people within this area feel like the peace process passed them by. I think the worst areas all over Northern Ireland are probably the interface areas. I think there needs to be a big piece of work where people on both sides of a particular interface are empowered and recognise that they're facing similar issues, I suppose, and they are neighbours, even though there may be a wall that divides them. These people are neighbours.
Linda, it may have been a shock for some people in this part of East Belfast whenever tourists began offering Irish language classes. What was the reaction like in the initial stages?
I think there were two different reactions, two extremes maybe. There were people who were really interested and felt that, this is the first time they'd ever had the opportunity to learn Irish in their own area. And they came and there was just so many of them, which was great. Then there was also a negative reaction from some people, a small number of people who, come into this building and said, oh, I'll never be in here again. This is disgraceful that Irish is happening here. There was talk of protests, and interestingly enough, some of the people who were talking about organising protests ended up becoming volunteers with us and becoming some of our learners. So, it has been a journey for the local area.
What sort of people from the Protestant Unionist community would be learning Irish? Would they all belong to one particular class or group, perhaps?
When we first started almost 10 years ago, they would have mostly been working class, mostly from, very close to Skenos in and around the general area. That has changed over the years. They just come from everywhere. And sometimes I look around a room and I think, where would this group of people ever meet together in this way, and friendships created, and, it's a very positive place to be.
Nuair thosaí mé héananig fólam na Gaeilge damsaí mé go lua gur ró Protestúna ggóil go don Gaeilge a gaiithúil am léanta. Sin go bhfuil sé ríthabhachta go bhfuil intin oscailte agam agus bhí intin oscailte agam a gcónaí sin ceann na buntáisí a thug má athair dús mar hapla Protestúnach Britain a ggé sin ach rinseisian iirecht don Gaeilge ólam nuair a bhí sé ionta góg. Dúirim go neamhghailmh gur Aontachtach meise, ach is duine daon leathach meise go mbeidh tá sin tábhachtach, agus tíomhstate an cradlaigh sin is féidir lom mar ról haon imirt a cibé socaí a bheithú an ina dhiaidh sin.
Go dé faoin Criochdheighilt sa lá atá inniu an scéal atá ag achraí a gcónaí a seo agus mar fáirt de sin déataí deireadh a chur leis an teorainn ar bhód de 100 agus a haon. Sin méid atá scríofa go sillar a go aontu ina an cheasta.
Tá pleanáil chun cinn ndiaidh san am seo ag Aontachtach forasacha ar na céisteannaí agus na hábhar a déitú a bheith ann dá bobal. Tá sé an am mar sin do chorrach seachas polaitíocht an mhaincar. Tá mé go lóirt le dúgbéirí ó ma hécheant ar haon, go dé mar a dhéanaí sésin castáin Aontas.
People talk about, making the case for the union as this. You always have to make a fiscal case for the union. Of course, you can argue about being the 5th largest economy in the world. You can argue about, the global reach that we have as a United Kingdom. All of these things you can talk about. You can talk about all of these opportunities that we have. within the United Kingdom. But it's that real sense of belonging. I think sometimes people don't quite get it, and when they ask me a question, I say, look, I'm not an economic unionist. You know, I'm a constitutional unionist. In other words, I want to be part of this union and watch it develop and grow. And when it makes mistakes, deal with its mistakes. And when it's doing something really well, to be part of it.
It's 100 years since partition and the implementation of the border in Northern Ireland. How should that be marked?
Well, it's interesting whether people use the term mark or celebrate or commemorate. And I think it's right to be able to look back at all of those things that went from partition to now and how we got to where we are. And it hasn't been an easy road. It hasn't been an easy road for anybody. You know, as a unionist, I know we got things absolutely wrong. I hope that nationalists can look and say, actually, I think we might have got things wrong as well. I think we can all own up to getting things wrong. But the most important thing is where we go next. What is the next 100 years? There are people who will want a united Ireland. That is a fair aspiration. I don't fear that. I want to stay part of the United Kingdom, and I think that's a fair aspiration.
Could you, as a unionist and indeed a unionist party leader, be content to live in a united Ireland were that to happen?
Yes, of course. You know, I'm a Democrat, and you know, if the vote was that we were to have a united Ireland, then that's a democratic vote, and that's where I will be living. I will not run away from this place. This is my home, and it's going to be my home regardless. But I'm going to caveat that with something, and that caveat is this, and I genuinely believe this, and I'll say this to you: it'll not happen in my lifetime. It'll not happen in my children's lifetime. I genuinely believe that. And I believe that because of the demographic that's coming up the middle, like this place that they live in. They like this little piece of geography that we call Northern Ireland. And that in the future will keep the status quo.
Thug cuain tú ina cheasta, séacáin go tí an tileáin seo, maríon leis an nealtanas faoi referan an seorann. A go bhád ribh sin caiimid a bheith smaointiú na féidirthachtaí agus na hiarhhairtí an déadú a bheith ann. An méús bhásan da agan sort féinneachta, go dé faoi bhreateachta, go dé faoi simbalagus, go dé faoi óran náisiúnta fiú an bhaim. Ní ró Criochdheighilt verfa mar ragra aibaní a bhí ionta casta, agus thuir sé tús le gastad nua, gastad a bhí ag marachtáil tíomhla chéile go mí compordach in Amani. Ach níor háilí duine bí an tionagar san adseirima a bhéú ag an líne seo an léirscáil, a scilt agus a scar cóphobal óna chéile. Táid ag marachtáil le hiarhhairtí na Criochdheighilte, agus bé go tí go teochar thocrú ag an ile a bhfuil daoine sásta leis. Idir an dálinn caiimid na gártaithe a leis mas féidir agus iarad a dhéanú na barnaí idir córsan a líanú. Barnaí a doscail suas céad bliain ó hen.